You know, it's really strange, but more people recognize me from Not Slanding
Mm-hmm.
than they do the Mamas and the Papas. But of course, that was, I started Not Slanding in '86,
Mm-hmm.
and we hadn't been the Mamas and the Papas since '67.
For over half a century, fans of the Mamas and the Papas have speculated about the internal strife that led to the band's collapse. Known for timeless hits like California Dreamin' and Monday Monday, the group dominated the 1960s music scene with their haunting harmonies and groundbreaking style. But behind the scenes, the band was plagued by personal entanglements, heartbreak, and substance abuse. Today, we're taking a closer look into the rise, triumph, and ultimate unraveling of the Mamas and Papas. The height of their success.
Your farewell song. What are you going to sing?
Well, we'd like to sing a medley of the tunes that are partially responsible for our enormous wealth.
By 1966, the Mamas and the Papas were at the pinnacle of their success. Their debut album had become a sensation, and they quickly followed it with The Mamas and the Papas, an album that solidified their place in the music industry. Songs like Monday Monday and I Saw Her Again showcased their rich vocal harmonies and innovative approach to songwriting. The group's music captured the zeitgeist of the 60s, a blend of dreamy introspection and unrestrained energy. Their appearance at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967, an event co-organized by John Phillips, further cemented their status as cultural icons. For the public, the band embodied the carefree, idyllic spirit of California. Behind the scenes, however, their relationships were already showing signs of strain. Michelle Phillips later admitted that the band's rise to fame was as overwhelming as it was exhilarating. Quote, "We were young and everything was happening so fast. It was hard to process," she said. Cass Elliot also felt the weight of success. Known for her humor and warmth, she often downplayed her frustrations, but those close to her saw a different side. Cass wanted recognition not just for her voice, but for her contributions to the group, Michelle shared in an interview. The band's tight harmonies and John Phillips' disciplined songwriting created an illusion of unity, but cracks were forming. Denny Doherty's playful charisma often clashed with John's exacting standards. Quote, "John was brilliant but demanding," Michelle recalled. "He wanted everything to be perfect, and that created a lot of tension." Despite the growing conflicts, the group continued to churn out hits, basking in their fame even as internal pressures began to mount. Behind the music, relationships in turmoil.
Then had to have lived a very fast life to have made the impression you did in just 3 short years.
It was just a lot of recording, just a lot of work.
Well, a lot of other
into
stuff.
that period.
While the Mamas and the Papas were celebrated for their harmonious sound, their personal lives were anything but. The group's relationships became a tangled web of love, betrayal, and heartbreak. At the center of this drama was Michelle Phillips, whose beauty and charisma captivated her bandmates and others in the 1960s music scene. Married to John Phillips, Michelle quickly found herself in a storm of romantic entanglements that created deep rifts within the group. One of the most notable sources of tension came from Denny Doherty's feelings for Michelle. Despite his close friendship with John, Denny found himself falling for Michelle, a situation that he later admitted was painful and disruptive. Quote, "She was intoxicating," Denny once said, "but it was a hopeless situation." Michelle, while committed to John at the time, admitted years later that the chemistry between her and Denny was undeniable. Their brief affair nearly shattered the group. When John discovered the betrayal, he was furious and demanded that Michelle be replaced. Quote, "John was controlling, and this was a line I crossed that he couldn't forgive," Michelle said. The drama didn't stop there. Cass Elliot, known for her larger-than-life personality, also had her own emotional struggles within the band. Cass was deeply in love with Denny, but her feelings were unreciprocated, which led to further tension. Quote, "Cass had so much love to give," Michelle once said, but Denny didn't see her that way, and it broke her heart. Despite the unspoken rivalry between Cass and Michelle, the two women shared a complex but enduring friendship. Quote, "Cass could be my harshest critic, but she was also my fiercest ally," Michelle remembered. Those overlapping relationships created a volatile atmosphere that bled into their work. Studio sessions were fraught with tension, and the once joyous camaraderie that had fueled their early success began to crumble. While the public saw a picture of 4 artists perfectly in sync, the reality was far more fractured. drug use and excess. As the Mamas and the Papas fame grew, so did their indulgence in the excesses of the 1960s music scene. Drugs became a significant factor in the band's unraveling, impacting their personal lives and creative process. John Phillips, often seen as the group's visionary leader, struggled with substance abuse that worsened as the years went on. Michelle Phillips recalled how John's drug use changed him. Quote, "John was brilliant, but the drugs made him paranoid and controlling. It was heartbreaking to watch." The group's drug use was not confined to any one member. Recreational substances were part of the culture they inhabited, but the consequences were severe. Cass Elliott's struggles with her weight and health were exacerbated by her own use of drugs, and Denny Doherty's charm often masked his own battles with alcohol and narcotics. One of the most infamous incidents came during the recording of their final albums, when John's erratic behavior nearly derailed the process. There were times when John would disappear for days, Michelle said, describing the chaos of trying to maintain any semblance of a schedule. The group's once clear artistic vision was clouded by these distractions, and their work began to suffer. Songs that had once flowed effortlessly were now painstaking to complete, as the band members struggled to maintain their creative cohesion. Despite the increasing toll, the band rarely addressed the issue publicly at the time. Their image as carefree, harmonious Californians belied the growing dysfunction within. Creative differences and egos. The Mamas and the Papas thrived on the unique chemistry of their four members, but their creative process was often a battleground. John, the primary songwriter and self-appointed leader, had a clear vision for the group's sound, but his controlling nature alienated the others. Quote, "John was a perfectionist," Michelle said. "He wanted every note, every lyric, every harmony to align with his vision, and it didn't leave much room for collaboration." Cass Elliot, whose powerhouse voice often stole the spotlight, increasingly sought recognition for her contributions. Although John appreciated Cass's vocal abilities, he often dismissed her input on arrangements or songwriting. Michelle later noted the unspoken friction this caused. Quote, "Cass was an artist in her own right," Michelle said. "She wanted to be seen as more than just the voice that brought John's songs to life." Cass's aspirations for a solo career grew stronger as the group dynamics became more toxic, further straining her relationship with John. Denny Doherty also clashed with John, though his disagreements were often more subtle. While Denny was happy to take creative direction during the early years, he grew increasingly frustrated by the lack of flexibility in the recording process. Michelle described Denny's frustration, quote, "He had such a natural, easygoing way of singing, and John would nitpick it to death." The breaking point, what really ruined the band. The Mamas and the Papas reached their breaking point in the late 1960s as personal betrayals and professional struggles collided. Michelle Phillips's affair with Gene Clark of the Byrds was one of the final blows to her marriage with John Phillips. Quote, "John was furious and rightfully so," she admitted years later. "We had already been through so much with my affair with Denny. This was just the last straw." Their marriage, which had been the foundation of the band's formation, became irreparably damaged, and their dynamic within the group was never the same. Cass Elliott's growing dissatisfaction also contributed to the band's unraveling. She felt increasingly sidelined by John's controlling nature and longed to pursue a solo career. The band's final album, The Mamas and the Papas, reflected the deep fractures within the group. The recording process was marked by disconnection, with members often recording their parts separately to avoid confrontations. By 1968, the group officially disbanded. For Michelle, the end of The Mamas and the Papas was bittersweet. Quote, "We had something magical, but we let our personal lives get in the way." Now it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite memory of the band? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.